Welcome to the Blessing and Cursing podcast. For the second week in a row, unforeseen circumstances has caused our initial invitee guest to not be here. I don't want to say we're going to scramble, but we'll make do with what God gives us. If, everything's within His will, everything's within His power. So I think we're going to continue the discussion that I had in my short podcast this morning on the traditions, and you see we have the title of Tradition, Don't Let Tradition Trump Truth, and kind of go a little bit deeper in that. And I don't want to have this conversation in a way that is going to be divisive and start an argument for the sake of arguing.
We don't like making people upset or
No.
discomforted or mad.
And part of me, as far as this topic goes, I don't think there is a right and wrong to it, the broad extent. There are some things that are hard, right and wrongs. But this is really just, as far as I can say, it's my opinion, having not grown up in that traditional mindset. So what I was talking about this morning is really, it started off with the question of, why did you come today? If you want to know what I'm talking about, you can go watch that and refer back to it. But it came to the point of, I think a lot of it is we feel that traditionally, because this is what you're supposed to do, or this is what has always been done, or this is how my family has always done it, we go to the same building, or we attend the same style service, and services are this same cookie cutter kind of pattern. And that is, we discussed that in Sunday school too. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't have to be the same for everyone in that.
Right.
If that makes sense. Like the 3 services we've had over here, I've loved that. That's been fantastic. The only reason I, again, am standing up today is because my knee hurt, and just so, everybody can hear what we're talking about. But we're just really having a really good discussion for the most part. It almost felt like Sunday school just rolled into service, just with one of us leading the discussion and the other one,
Is Sunday school biblical?
I don't read anything about it. Except for, and so here we go, because Sam asked that same question. He said, what is the Acts church? What did that look like?
Oh, he did. In that way.
In that way. And really what we read from is they sat around and they talked. And I'm sure there was some Torah reading. I'm sure there was some, hey, we got a letter from Paul. Oh, we got a letter from Paul. Someone else write back to him. I'm sure there was a lot of that, but I think that almost Sunday school is more biblical than traditional services.
So, one thing that he was reading this morning out of Acts was daily.
Yes.
But it said the church met daily. But do you think that meant that all the same people met daily? Or there were members of the body of Christ that met together daily? Or do you think everybody could make it every time to everyone's house?
I don't think either one of those. The way that I've always taken it, and like historically speaking, is it wasn't like a, hey, we're having church, come on in. Is it as much as it was the body was around one another for reasons we had discussed, and that it just happened. That just like we have conversations, just like what this is, how it started was we were just having conversations about God. I think that's how the church was for a very long time. And as things got safer and there began to be more organization to it, I think it naturally developed into more of a standard. And then, of course, we took and destroyed it. But I don't think it was necessarily like, all right, guys, every day we're going to meet at, about the sun being at that point in the sky. Of course, they could tell time in a different way back then. But we're going to meet there, and we're going to meet at Peter's house today. I don't think it was like that.
Right.
I think it was just more so we're together. How great is God? Or
Well, I think the one thing that it does prove is that they were together.
yes.
That they did things together, they helped one another. And like we were saying today, they were more in the trader aspect.
Yeah.
And, even my dad growing up in the 20s and 30s, they grew up very trader type. And even by the time Dad died, still had that mentality of he would rather, you know, trade a bucket of corn for a gallon of milk than to go to the store and buy it.
Yeah.
He just would way rather do that.
Yep. I'm kind of getting into that like time of my life now. Talking to JD, he has a antique book press.
Mhm.
I make paper. I've needed a book press for a while.
He has no use for it.
He's using it, but he has another system he can use for making what he makes with it. But he needs a good splitting axe, and he doesn't want like a fat wedge. He wants more of just a heavy axe. It's like, I've got that. You know, let's work on that.
Yeah.
And you know, with Sam, he's talking about he's wanting to put a new handle on a hammer, and he asked like for some advice just because I handle things a lot.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, Sam, you're the blacksmith of the group. You know how to do it, but the
Yes.
wood aspect of it. So we're working with that, and he's like, come over and use the shop whenever, that kind of thing. And that really is more. Money kind of takes away humanity. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
To a certain extent.
I was just talking to a guy at our work the other day, and I said, you know, money's not real.
It is not.
It's not real. It's really not. I mean, and we get all wrapped around the axle about money, and it's not really even a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Time is real. So a job requires you to spend so much time, and they'll give you back something that's not even real.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying, for it. Where in the old days, you know, when I'm saying old, I mean, I'm not talking very long ago, all the way back to Christ, is that your time of what God had given you the ability to do was traded for time God given ability of someone else,
Mm-hmm.
and what you were really swapping was time, which has value.
Mm-hmm.
Which, when you say that you're available for someone, that time can't be got. You can't make that back.
Yeah.
We can make money back. We can work longer. We can get overtime. We can do 2 jobs. We can do whatever. But time can't. If you give someone your time, you're giving them something you can never get back.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, so we look at society in just the most basic sense, and it was the same across all cultures for a long time. If you were somebody that fished, and I was somebody that cut down trees, and you needed wood, I'll get you some wood, you help me get some fish,
Mhm.
you know? Or I'll help you do this, you help me do that kind of thing. And people still do that to a great extent
They do.
now.
Yeah.
But it is definitely farther. And so with the money aspect, it is good in the sense of if I go to another town and I don't have, you know, my ox with me to pull a tree out of the woods,
Mhm.
it's good that I can say, you know, here's some money, can I have some food?
Yeah.
But it does take away a little bit of that personality with it.
It does.
And what I find hilarious today is the people, society has kind of gone distant from face-to-face interaction people.
Absolutely.
There's the internet, all that stuff. And people like that.
Mhm.
But then there's people that are upset that they get to use a self-checkout at
Mhm.
grocery stores.
Oh yeah.
And
The same people that live off the internet at home, then they want some kind of human interaction when they go to the store.
yeah,
That's sort of split personality to me. I don't understand.
yeah, I've never understood it. I prefer the self-checkout just for the simple fact that I can just go and go. You know, I don't have to, and not that I don't like having conversations, but I don't have to have it. You know, we don't have to do this. But I saw somebody that had said something along the line. I can't remember where I'd seen it with my limited social media use, but they said, "When is the holiday party for all the people that have to work self-checkout?" And I was like, "Just don't do that. Don't be that kind of person. Don't be hateful for the sake of being hateful."
Which the self-checkout areas do have a person that
Sure.
oversees them.
And there's also usually at least one register open with a person.
Mm-hmm.
Do whatever. You know, our system that me and Savannah have for the store is really good. All the kids get in one buggy. All the products are in another buggy. I take the kids to the van so they don't get restless. She checks out a lot quicker because there's not kids in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Boom. Can't do that on a person checkout.
Right.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You got to find ways around that. But that's another thing that is in this traditional mindset that people don't want to break out of, or people are afraid to break. You know, a lot of the things we say this all the time, that we would get kicked out of churches for even mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Especially whenever I'm like, if you don't have a good reason for coming to church, don't come.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're bringing down everything. You're not providing a blessing. You're not going to receive a blessing because you won't allow it. And there are exceptions. There are times when you can go and not want to, and you can get something out of it. When we had the men's meeting, I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay home. I had stuff I could do, but I'm glad I went because it was such a blessing.
I think the difference in that is, like, I think you're like me. I was being drawn to go,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to.
Yeah.
That's different than not being drawn and not wanting to.
Yes. In my mindset, it was, you really need to go down here, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then the other side was like, but I could not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that could work.
And that's just that internal war in ourselves,
Yeah.
that we want to do things for ourselves, and we really don't want God to be Lord. And so if we turn over to that Lordship, then we're going to go ahead and go, and something good's going to come of that.
Yeah.
But if we are like, there is no draw for you to go, and you don't want to go, and if you do go, you're just going to be hateful to everybody, you're going to be in a bad mood, and that's totally different.
Yeah. Do you think the question is do you understand what I'm trying to convey in the question of why are you here today?
Do I?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Does it make sense to you?
It does.
Do you? Because I want it to be a self-reflection tool. You know, everything is looking inward to try and do whatever we can with that inwardness. And so, you know, in looking through that, I've seen there's a lot of things of like, I feel like I have to.
Mm-hmm.
Uniquely, I feel like I have to be here. There's always the underlying of the hope that whatever comes from it. And I think of as a layperson, if I were to write, I feel I have to, there's something that's crossed there, something that's not working there.
Yeah.
Maybe you're in the wrong facility. Maybe you're at the wrong church. Maybe you need to be doing something there. Maybe you've got something that's stopping you from wanting to meet with God and the body of believers, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I just hope everybody's taking it for what it is and not just writing down what they think I want to hear and like I bet he is going to read it. I don't care. It's for you guys.
Back into that mentality of, you know, where you have something somebody else don't have, and then vice versa.
Mhm.
To me, it leads me to where Paul's talking about, you know, we're the body of Christ and we're all different. And so when you're in the church, Big C Church, and you have something to offer, you know, you have balance. Let's say you're a big toe. You offer balance.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then someone else maybe is an eye, and you offer sight.
Mm-hmm.
So that toe, maybe even though it's balanced, it still can't see which way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to work together.
Yeah.
And that's how, you know, like Dad was, and not even just Dad, but in my childhood, how things worked at my household is we had this balance with all of our friends and neighbors and church folk that we would trade things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it gave a perfect balance for everyone. And everyone didn't have to have everything.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't on little islands.
Mm-hmm.
And it stops that island mentality. And that's what we've come to, what you were just talking about. When we got this social media and all this stuff, you got people that's living on islands like you've been feeling. You're living on this island, and it's not good.
Mm-hmm.
We're not meant to live on an island. We're meant to be a body.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. I think about the practical aspect of that too. We talk about how, you know, you and I are in a partnership in a lot of aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And people will look at that and they'll be like, you know, they're nothing alike in that. And at first we're like, no, we are, and then we're not even at all.
Yeah.
But, you know, we think about all the work. You know, yesterday we fixed the van window. You have knowledge and equipment to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
Yeah.
Well, what I can do is
You
drive a
have-
fence post.
Well, but also you have youth and ability and agility, and
Yeah.
and I'm getting old and tired. Even though I have the mindset and the ability and the know-how, you have the youth and the strength and the Yeah.
And so, yesterday you traded your time to teach me and allow me to use that.
Mm-hmm.
And, the few weeks before that, I needed a big old stick of wood and all those tools.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't set it up and like, do this and I'll give you this, but
Right.
it was a natural of like,
Mm-hmm.
You got stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
Let me come down there and do it. I think I start off today like starting to dig holes and like cut stuff up and wound up putting a fence up. That's what it is, you
Yeah.
participate in that.
Mm-hmm.
And really your upbringing speaks to that culture so much
Mhm.
because the area you grew up in wasn't a wealthy area.
Oh, absolutely.
And it makes more sense for one family to have this and another to have this and both of them being able to use that in union
Absolutely.
as opposed to neither one of them having it,
Yes.
And that's how society's supposed to work.
Yeah. See, my old neighborhood, that I came from 3 years ago, my neighbors, we all kind of had that methodology.
Mm-hmm.
We had access to each other's garages or whatever, and it's like, just let me know that, you come and got this. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and get it. Just let me know, you're the one who has it.
Yeah.
And share tools or share whatever. If one had a pickup truck and one didn't, they would swap vehicles for a while.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and it was just, to us, it was just the easy way and the best way of helping each other out. And we didn't think of it as, we're doing this direct specifically.
Yeah.
I'm gonna buy this item, so you buy this item.
No.
It just worked out
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
And plus, too, the knowledge, like you're saying, you'd have one person who's very knowledgeable in this,
Yeah.
and they would be able to help others when they needed it. And then, in turn, they would find out, oh, man, I'm lacking on this, and put the word out, and somebody's like, yeah, I understand how to do that.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't have
And it
the
was-
pride issue you have now.
No.
Yeah. No one was so proud that nobody else could teach them anything, or
Yeah.
my milk's worth more than your taters or whatever.
There's a pride issue and a trust issue now. You thought about like swapping vehicles. That would never happen. Outside of like a family, situation,
Yeah.
and it's my neighbors are fantastic because every house directly around mine, they're either retired or they work from home, and so if something's going on, they'll let Savannah know, hey, there's a dog that's been running around, watch the kids while they're out, or there was this going on over here, and that's very good. They look out for that. The man directly across the street, Wayne, he's older. He's got his grandsons that live there. Well, I noticed he had a little tree cut down, and like the next day, he was out with a shovel digging around the tree. And I was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Do you need help? You want me to come over there?" And he's like, "Oh no, my grandson's just in. He's getting this tool over here." And I was like, "Well, I just dug up a bunch of bushes. I've got a mattock. I can help out." And he's like, "Oh, we got it taken care of." And whenever it was just him, I was like, I'm not going to let him dig it because it's some work digging up roots from a tree,
Oh,
let
it
alone a
is.
bush.
Yeah.
But he had his grandson out there, and I all the time see Curtis across the street. He's going to JD's in-laws, talking to them. I'm sure they're swapping eggs, all sorts of stuff, and it is kind of that little bit there, but none of that happens outside of that I can see. Of course, I'm in the center of it, so it may happen all the time. I just don't see it. But I remember Curtis used to have goats. One of them got loose. Well, me and Casey lured the goat back into his fence. Walking over there. If the dogs get loose, everybody's kind of out there looking to help get the dogs back in there. It is a good community like that. And I've never experienced that because the house that I grew up in, we had family all the way around, but it was all retired elderly family that really couldn't do much, and the neighborhood wasn't a neighborhood that you really did that in. But the way that I read the early church is it wasn't even like they were just in a neighborhood of believers. It was they were alone together, and they fully relied on each other because for a time they were hunted. And so they had to do that. They had to do with what they could as quietly as possible. I don't think that is what today's church is meant to do because I don't think that's reasonable.
Yeah, we're not, well, at least not, like I said this morning, there's a wave of time that changes.
Yeah.
And so for the moment, no. And that wave will change.
But I don't think that what we're doing is also what we're supposed to do either. I think
Right.
it's somewhere in between the two.
Yeah.
So you guys were in church before I was, statistically. And this, explain to me the concept that we dealt with this morning of church letters. Because to me, that seems like the most useless tradition that I've come across. I don't see value in that. Explain the hopes of it, and then I'll explain to you why I think it's foolish.
You want to start?
Well, and you know, growing up, as I was younger, I didn't know about a lot of these things that were going on. But as I got older in church, you know, and I heard about, like, say, you know, if you're in the Baptist denomination or Southern Baptist or something like that, where they would have association meetings, and they would get together, and the pastors would talk about what they felt the needs were, and if there were changes that they wanted to try to make, then, you know, they would send that information back, you know, to the church, and kind of gave you a minutes of the meeting and what was discussed, and you know, where we think we need to concentrate and stuff like that. You know, the letters that Paul was writing, and the other, you know, the Gospels and everything, I mean, those were so necessary in order for us to have, you know, the Word. The letters between the churches, modern day, I feel like it's important, you know, to help, you know, guide, you know, us and maybe get us looking at, okay, where are we lacking? Where are we seeing, you know, the need? But it's, I don't think it's near as important.
So the church letters I'm talking about are like members going from church to church and like requesting that letter.
I'm joining this church by letter or by statement.
I
That's
got
what
you.
he's talking about.
I misunderstood.
Oh no, yeah, I might have just I might have phrased it off.
But that's traditional too, what he's talking about.
It is.
So
We're not a part of an association, so we don't share those.
Yeah.
to me, so you see, well, we just read about it today in John 3, where, what was the last guy?
Demetrius.
Yeah, he says, John says, you know, or was it the first one? Anyway,
Gaius.
you know, I'm saying, John's saying, me and we, me and my people
Mm-hmm.
are saying this guy's good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that I 100% understand, and I think we should still do that.
Sure.
But here's the problem, and this goes right back into what I was talking about this morning, is that if they're not when I say good, I don't mean that they're not good people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, if you're going to write a letter and you're going to say that people are in good standing, then don't not be a man and say that, you know, I ain't seen them in 6 months or 6 years or whatever, and write a letter and say, yes, they're in good standing here and they would work great at your church.
Mm-hmm.
Just say what it is. Say, you know, I ain't seen them in 3 years, but, you know, we loved them when they was here. I ain't seen them in 3 years, and, you know, that's for you to decide at your assembly.
Yeah.
But don't just lie about it. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So if John in that letter had not seen Demetrius in a long time, or you know whatever, and heard that he hadn't been going to church anywhere or anything else, do you think he would have said what he said?
Right.
But the one guy, what's his name? The dude that he give a bad report.
I couldn't pronounce it when we were reading
Whatever it
it.
was.
I know.
Diotrephes. I
Yeah,
think.
in the third letter of John there, Little John's, he has two people that he's saying good things about. One guy that John's a man, and he said even though he is the epitome of love other than Christ, John's a very loving person,
Mm-hmm.
but yet he still is like, hey, this dude here, they ain't nobody likes him.
Yeah.
He, you know, he don't have a good report among men,
Yeah.
and he writes that down.
So that's what it is.
That to me,
Yeah.
but the problem is to me is that it just goes through a, you know, like going through the line at McDonald's. It just is what, you know. It just gets the same. You know, might as well just put it on a stamp. Yep, they're perfect people.
Mhm.
See, you know, send them off to the next church. Yep, because they don't have another stamp. They don't have one that's truth.
Yeah.
That's why I don't like tradition. Tradition is that you welcome them on to the next church. That's
Yeah.
tradition. That's not truth, though.
Yeah.
If we ain't seen them in 3 months, we don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
We don't know what their life's like. We don't know if they're still following Christ or not. We ain't seen them. We ain't heard from them.
Yeah.
So how can you write down yes?
Right. So, you know, I called Phil this morning because we had a request for some letters like back in September. And I've been trying to figure out what to do for it because I didn't know.
The people were here before Austin was here.
So I found like our little like, oh, this is the letter, you know, of recommendation, what have you. They still have 19 on them for the year, by the way.
Did they?
19 whatever.
Yeah.
Fill it in. So we got to get something that fits on that. But it had a, you know, from the church at Sugar Grove to X church. These are the members. This is to certify that, blah, in good standing. Left that blank. It said on the back, here is like the recommendations. And it has like attend service, always, sometimes, when they can. Sunday school, prayer meetings. How do they
Well,
tithe?
you can definitely tell that's from 19 something.
Yeah.
Because no, but they won't do that today.
It says like, how do they tithe? Are they on top of it? Are they occasionally? Are they $5 bills on the plate kind of people? What do they do there? Do they preach? Do they teach? Do they lead women's ministry? Do they music? Whatever it is. I had not met these people, had never heard of them. I've been attending, maybe not pastoring, but attending this church for 6+ years. So I couldn't put anything on there. So I filled out what I could, and I changed the date to 20. And on the back of it, I just wrote a little section. I was like, haven't seen them in 6 years, can't speak to their character, can't speak to their value. I pray that this is a sign that God has intervened and they have, you know, blah, 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 blah.
Sure. Yeah.
Sign the pastor. The second one was people I did know, but they've not attended here in like 3 years. I know them as people, and I had assumed they had been a part of this church the entire time. So I also know that pastor. So I just wrote directly to him, hey, I thought they was with you this whole go-around. You know them as well as I do. Fantastic people. Haven't seen them in a little bit.
Yeah.
That's all you can put for that.
But you can't just rubber stamp it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was thinking today, and I kind of talked to Sam and Morgan about this because 5 conversations go on at one time sometimes. And we had mentioned that, and I said, she said, how can you have a letter in good standing, because to join another church, you can't be in good standing with another church because you've got to visit, you've got to be a part of it before you can join. And I was like, that's actually a really good point.
Yeah.
Because you can't be. And I said, what I think moving would work if like you were moving to a church that you were already familiar
Like Tim
with.
moved from East Tennessee to here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, you know, that would work. And I said, but other than that, and again, I don't see the need of that anyways, other than just to let the former church know, hey, they're coming here now. Awesome. Rad. I joined by statement because I would have felt really stupid saying, hey, contact this church that I was a member of like 10 years ago, and no one's still there. They don't know me. It would have been the same thing with that, you know?
I see that. Yeah. In fact, I was sitting here thinking, when I left the church, you know, that I was going to, and I came down here, I didn't ask for a letter. You know, I just came down here, and you know, I visited several churches.
Well, you're in trouble.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I visited several churches, you know, and was invited, you know, to come and spend time at some churches.
Jonathan might let you in, but I don't think we can if you didn't get a letter when you leave.
It's that letter is becoming a serious issue. I have to call or social media or something back home, see if I can't get one of those.
We'll send a form letter out to them. That'd be a good experiment.
Yeah.
Find like the church that we've not been to in 10 years.
So can I do my home church back in Virginia.
Request the letter, see what they say about you.
I bet the last time I was there was probably, oh wow, probably 27 or 28 years since I've been to my home church that I was raised in.
They send back a letter. Always attend service. Always teaching.
Probably. Yeah. They'd say, Philip who?
You're like, I've been at this church 30 years. I don't recognize that name.
Now there are some people that still go there that went there when I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think it's in the.
There's no value to it, is what I'm
Business.
getting at.
No, it would be a fun experiment.
Yeah. The only value that I see in the letters, like I said, is just letting a church know, hey, if you ain't heard from them in a while, it's because they're here.
Mhm.
Okay, I get that. Other than that, I don't. And like you said, maybe just to
So-
see, like, what is their rapport.
So let's get back to movement churches. So why would a family or a person move? You said like moving, like for your job or whatever, and you're moving in a different part of the country. So we talked about, I think you did on your thing this morning, about people traveling from one church to the other. Or when Paul wrote, he wrote to the whole city, and they amongst themselves would spread this letter out of Paul. But today we have this idea, like you talked about this morning, of this division, and this assembly has either church hurt me, or my friends don't go there anymore, or whatever. And my question has always been, because that I've talked to you and I've talked to Dean, I've talked to different people about leaving this assembly, and I cannot get peace with God about it. I want to go other places, and I can't. He will not allow me to, and I feel like, why won't you allow me? I'm not doing anything here, Like, what reason do I need to stay here? Evidently, he has one, because he will not release me from here. Now, I on my own could release me from here and just take off and go somewhere. I think I would be 100% out of God's will, and nothing good would come of it. So that's always been a question for me, for people that move from church to church to church, is when you left that church, did God tell you, or did you tell you? And then you somehow tried to figure out some kind of, it's sort of like what we started Sunday school talking about. Did you try to then jumble up some scripture to make it okay what you did? Or did God tell you to move? You know what I'm saying? Did you do it amongst yourself, or did the Spirit lead you to move?
Yeah.
Like with Dean, when he left, I knew months ahead of time. And he would sob and crawl me, and we would pray together, and we would try to get a different answer, because I didn't want him to leave and he didn't want to leave, but God was telling him he had to go. And so that's not what we wanted, and we prayed and prayed and prayed against it, because we know that sometimes prayer can change God's mind. And we prayed and prayed and prayed, and it just never would come for me or him. And he'd call me and he'd say, "What do you got?" And I'd say, "Still no." The answer, still no. And he would say, "That's what I got too." And so he finally told the church, and then he stayed for another month.
I think he was finishing a walk through Revelation. And
Yeah,
he had like a few
he
chapters
finished
left.
that out. He stayed a while. He didn't just walk out.
Yeah.
And he let everybody know, and he helped to fortify the church before he left. I think the only person, and I don't care who's watching or who's listening, I think Dean Wright is the only person in the 7 years or 8 years, 10 years, however long I've been here, that has ever left this church under God's will. That's just, tell me I'm wrong. Call me. You all know where I live. You all know where I'm at. Put it on Facebook, whatever. Tell me I'm wrong. He is the only person that has ever begged and pleaded with God to stay and say, it doesn't matter the situation. It doesn't matter what this looks like. It doesn't matter that someone made a mistake or whatever. It's, did God draw you, or did you leave and then try to scripturally find out that, well, this is the reason I left,
Mhm.
or my upbringing tells me this is wrong, or whatever. Did God's Holy Spirit tell you to leave that church? I've never had one tell me yes.
Well, like you said, from what I've heard of the recent history of the church, he's also the only person that like did his level best to fortify it before he left,
Absolutely.
and not just, hey, I won't be here tonight, and then never show back up.
Right.
You hear that a lot from churches,
Absolutely.
unless it's a.
I'm not talking. No, I'm not talking about Sugar Grove in general.
No, yeah,
I'm talking about the church abroad.
yeah.
When you moved from one church to the other, I'm just talking about what I know of from here,
Mhm.
but I see it everywhere, is that people just move without being moved to the Spirit. And we talk about being Spirit-led, are we? Or are we just doing things and then trying to justify it with Scripture?
Sure. If I had my way, which obviously is differing, I want to visit other churches just to learn. You know, like we talk about, like, oh, I would like to go to the Orthodox Church, just to see, and go to Mass, just to see, and obviously, like, I don't have clearance to do that. I've not been told to do that. That's a me thing, not a God thing. But you know, that would be my, and I don't see that there would be a problem with that if it's under the auspices of, I'm still worshiping God, still praising God. I just want to see where, you know, where this is coming from, what's going on. Because we hear a lot, and we assume a lot about churches. You know, everyone has their opinion on big churches. Everyone
Yeah.
has their opinion on little churches.
Sure.
Everyone has their opinion on this denomination, on that. Not a single church is doing everything right. And
Absolutely.
I don't think there's churches out there that are doing every single thing wrong.
No.
I think there's value to be had in all of that.
Absolutely.
And it would be a nice experiment, in my mind at least, to see where the right is and where the blatantly wrong is.
Mhm.
You know? And that's not to say, like, I don't do that as well. I also, like, very quickly and say, like, oh, I guarantee this church is like this. I don't know that. I don't know that at all.
Yeah, but doing what you say would stop that.
At least for me.
Yeah.
You know, and the people that would care to listen.
Sure.
Because you can Google, like, oh, what's the difference in this denomination? And you're going to hear somebody from this denomination tell you what this denomination does differently.
So this just comes to me. So if we treated the church, the Big C church, like we do now, back when Paul was writing letters to the church, right?
Mhm.
So, do you get your whole theology from 1st and 2nd Corinthians?
Right.
Right? Do you get your whole theology from the book of Galatians? No. So if me and my four down here at Sugar Grove just had our own letter from whomever, from God, so to speak, and that's what problems we have here, then, and he tells us what we're doing good, just like in Revelation, he tells us what we're doing good, he tells us what we're doing bad.
Mhm.
What if all those churches, Laodicea, all them, what if we just got to read one of them?
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And I mean, that's really how we act as the American church today, is that, well, we got our own problems over here. You know, we don't need your problem. We got our own problem. What if we only read book of Corinthians or the book of Galatians, or, you know, we only studied, what's the one, Sardis,
Mhm.
you know, the church at Sardis, and we were just stuck on that, and that's all we studied. That's ludicrous.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, the body is the whole body of Christ. And if we're stuck up in Sugar Grove, or we're stuck up in Vision, or we're stuck up in whatever, we're wrong.
Yeah. It's
And
like,
if we're not sharing with one another, and if we're too proud to share our ups and downs with other assemblies, we're wrong.
yeah. You know, that one reminds me of Walter saying, that evangelist that said that the only two books that a Gentile believer needs to study is Luke and Acts.
What?
Everything else doesn't matter to the Gentile believer. The rest of it's just for Jews.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of limiting. It's missing out on quite a bit. And his explanation for that was that's the only New Testament books that was written by a Gentile. Therefore, it's for Gentiles.
He's true. But, I mean, he's true in that's
He's,
the only
he's
Gentile
accurate.
book.
He's not right.
accurate. Yeah, that is an accurate statement.
It is.
But his theology is off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Cultish podcast has a slogan on their T-shirts and mugs that says "Bad theology hurts people," and that's a really good thought. That's a really good statement to make for it. Is bad theology hurts people. We talk about church hurt. We talk about all these issues that we've had, and it comes from largely bad practice of theology that we have going. Like I said this morning, I don't think that the way that we do things at Sugar Grove is the perfect way, and I definitely don't think that it's for everybody.
Well, I think it's hard. So what we strive for, I believe, here is truth.
Yeah.
And what's hard about that is that when we try to attach ourselves to other assemblies, is that just as throughout history, people don't like truth, and people don't like to be transparent.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't like to bear one another's burdens and all those things. They want to get up on Sunday, put their money in the offering plate, say that, that I'll give, and I've listened to the preacher, and they want to go home, and then they don't. It's sort of like what you was talking about, Tim, about, you went to work at ORNL, and you had these friends at work, and then as soon as the whistle blowed, they weren't your friends anymore. And that's how I see the American church, is the bell rings at 10 o'clock, and all these people are your friends. And then when the bell rings at noon and everybody leaves, it's sort of like Steve was talking about, and they get in their cars, and if you get out of the parking lot before them, they're going to run you over.
Mm-hmm.
They're not your friend anymore. And they were just in worship with you.
Yeah.
Man, that's just hitting me real hard right now. I mean, they're just they're fake.
Yeah.
And so truth really hurts them. And so when you try to share that truth and say, I need help, we as Sugar Grove need help.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we go try to get it, but we're not going to lose the standard of truth to get that help. We'll stay with Christ
Mm-hmm.
and the truth if it's just 6 of us.
Mm-hmm.
But we will not lose that standard. Now, does that mean we don't have compassion? We don't have love? No. It just means that we're not going to back off of truth just to get, more of the body together.
Yeah.
But if the body that we find wants truth also, it'll draw us together.
Yeah. But we won't compromise our standard for
We won't
another
compromise
tradition.
God's standard.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what we
Yeah.
do our best to go for.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think Morgan really hit it today. Is she was like, we have something special here in the way that we operate, but that's not how a lot of people want it. And I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
Because we're weird. We do things different.
Yes.
And-
But we
and-
should still be able to associate with
Yes.
other styles.
We do really
Yeah.
good with vision at that too,
But
because
they're different.
services are polar opposites. They're the equivalent of me and you of services.
Yes.
But 90% of 90%, we can have conversations, we can have meetings, we can have prayer group things, and have no conflict whatsoever.
Right.
We can go and sit whenever they have somebody they can come and it's fine. It works.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think like if I regularly attended Vision, I would desire more of what we have here. I feel like if they came here, they would
Sure.
desire more of what they have.
But think of, so here's the thing that I think you're missing in that conversation. For you're missing it because you lived it.
Mm-hmm.
But for what I want the audience to hear is how many hard conversations have you, being the pastor here, and Jonathan being the pastor there, had to have so that we have that. It's work.
Yeah.
It took work. It took time. Y'all both had to spend time. Y'all both had to spend work, and you both had to come to a biblical agreement.
Yeah.
Because that don't happen without work. Is what I'm getting at. Even as truth centered as both us and Vision are, that didn't come easy.
Correct. And you know,
The way you worded it, it sounded like that just fell together.
no.
So what I'm getting at is when you go try this and it just don't fall together, don't quit.
Correct.
Yeah.
So both parties have to be willing,
Mhm.
and it has been since we've known them. You know, we've had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of backs and forths, and none of it has ever been like, well, this idiot, he said this. It's been like, this is something that's concerning.
Yes.
Let's
How
talk
do
more
you
on
get
that.
to this?
Yeah. And every time it from both sides, it's been like, well, this is where I'm coming from this. Well, what about this? And there's been some times where we've been like, okay, we're on the same page.
That's what I'm saying. We need each other.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of times where we're like, I don't see it that way, but,
Mhm.
it's not a salvation issue.
Yeah.
We can go from there.
Or I'll pray about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what it boils down to. There's never, if we have biblical, like, principle on it, let's talk about it.
Absolutely.
And
if we're wrong, show us we're wrong.
And I've also noticed, whenever we go into those discussions, is we will preface it with, "This is my opinion.
Mhm.
What do you think about this?" Or, "This is how I'm interpreting this. If you got another interpretation on it," and I think that's hard, and it is hard. And you can watch podcasts.
We
where,
don't want to do that.
No,
Yeah.
the people can watch podcasts where we've been together, and you can see we've had disagreements.
Absolutely.
We've had what appear to be knockdown dragouts, and if you left it at that, you didn't know the background of it, you would think these people hate each other.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, oh, the next week we're like crying and hugging at a prayer meeting because we love each other so much.
Yes.
And you have to be able to have those conversations.
Absolutely.
That's what it is. The way that I phrase it is the hill to die on.
Mhm.
Jesus literally died on that hill for us. And then we talked about with the first miracle, he didn't want to do that.
Right.
But that wasn't a hill worth dying on.
Mhm.
That was the point where Jesus said, okay, she's not listening, so I'm just gonna do this.
Mhm.
It's not worth getting an argument about.
Plus, still, his word and his upbringing, all were, he wasn't the kind of person in his human ability that argued with his mother.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So you can't take the man part of God away there in that story, and say that this is not his physical mother,
Yeah.
and say that even he in himself, in his God self, teaches us, to obey our parents.
Mhm.
And so you can't take that out of that story.
Mhm.
And, but we look at it as here as a woman telling God what to do.
Yeah.
He's all man and all God.
I think a lot of that comes from the translation where he says woman.
Yes.
And what we miss is that the word that was used is more associated with like ma'am. Something, of like a proper, thing. But we think woman and we're like, woman?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
that's-
What have I to do with thee?
We Americanized the Bible.
Yeah. There's something else I was going to throw on that too that I can't remember. Oh, I don't think that was the first miracle.
Oh.
I think it's first recorded. Absolutely.
Mhm.
This isn't like, oh, I found a secret text
Oh,
that
you
has
mean
more.
because she's like, she knows he can do it.
Because she doesn't hesitate. She
Yeah.
doesn't think, oh, can you go out and buy some?
Uh-huh.
She's just like, fix it. And then
So-
she leaves. Can't be the first.
So they were probably not extremely well off. And, she's like, she knows who he is above all people.
Mm.
And, hard times come, and she's probably like, be real nice to have something to eat this evening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it could have been, yeah.
Well,
Because she had no doubt.
yeah.
I mean, she just went right on and said, do what he says,
Yeah.
because she had zero doubt that he could do it.
Yeah.
So that does play into your mind there of, had he done things before?
Popular belief Joseph was dead by this time. Because outside of young Jesus being left at the temple for a few days,
Yeah, he disappeared.
you don't hear about it.
Yeah.
So popular belief is that he passed on.
Yeah.
And so Jesus would have been the caretaker. Basically his family being the oldest.
Yeah.
Has to be the oldest.
Yeah. Pedophiles.
Yeah. And so, that word again. And so,
That is a word.
it does lend me to believe that he had done miraculous things prior. And that it was,
I've
don't
never
wanna-
thought about that.
I don't want to say that it was commonplace for her,
Uh-huh.
but it didn't take a big leap of faith for her to say, Jesus can figure this out. in
Man,
whatever
I mean,
form that is.
Yeah, because when you think that, man, she has zero hesitation
Yeah.
and zero looking. I mean, she just says what she says and just goes on back to the party.
Well, even from the very beginning of it, she wasn't asking him what we should do. She says, "Do this.
Yeah.
Figure this out." There was never a "What do you think?" or
Yeah,
"Do you have any
uh-uh.
money? You think we can run to the market?" It was, "They're out of wine. Handle this."
100% faith that he'd work it out.
It's not yet my time. He's got it taken care of. He'll
She just
direct.
goes on with her
Yeah.
business.
So she had that figured out.
Yeah.
I've thought about that long and hard
I've
for a
never
minute.
thought of it that way. But,
Yeah, and so we also have to remember that for that, as far as we know, none of the gospel writers were present.
oh, right.
We can assume, maybe John, maybe Matthew had been there at the time, because the dates are kind of iffy on a lot of that stuff. But a lot of it was probably, what really happened here. And that could have been verbatim from Mary.
Mhm.
Mary was like, "Hey, remember this?"
Yeah.
And because the gospel's focused on the birth and then the actual, ministry of. Everything in between it's not mentioned.
Yeah.
Not that it's not important, it's just not important for what we need.
Well, that one guy that you was talking about, he is 100% right. That the scripture, the Bible, the canon, the whatever you want to call it,
We'd have to ask Walter who that was, but yeah.
is absolutely a 100% Jewish history book. I mean, because there's all kind of things going on
Mhm.
in the world. This is specifically the how did we get to this point of Christ, and from a 99% Jewish perspective, and even with the Gentiles that's there, they're surrounded by Jews, and this is a Jewish thing, and they're just involved.
Mhm.
Just like us, we're grafted in, but our root, goes to Christ. But we are a limb grafted on to a Jewish tree, so to speak.
I would say there are 3 books out of the 66 that aren't Hebrew Jew centered.
Yes.
And that is Luke,
Mhm.
which is still centered on Jewish
It is.
things.
Yeah.
It's just from a Gentile perspective.
Mhm.
Acts,
Yeah.
because that's
Everything.
passing from Judaism to
Christianity.
the beginnings of Christianity from a Gentile perspective, and Job,
Mhm.
because Job wasn't a Hebrew,
Right.
and he didn't come from a Hebrew area.
Mhm.
He had his own relationship with the same God, and it had the same tenets to it from what we can see.
Got Moses' attention.
Yeah, it had sacrifice. It had the communication. It had the relationship. It
What do
had
you think Moses thought when he read that?
you have to debate. Did Moses bring it to the people?
Well,
Did he find it? What
yeah.
came with it? No, I guarantee.
I mean, if history is true, or the thought of history,
I don't think it would have been a problem.
I know, but I mean, I think he would have been elated.
So I see, and that mindset goes to almost that he would have been pleasantly surprised to find somebody outside of the tribes that was
Well,
following.
I think it would have bolstered his faith in God.
Yeah, I'm sure,
Yeah.
but I don't see it as any different than Melchizedek.
Exactly.
Whomever,
Yeah, let's not get started.
for those that
we
know,
don't have time today.
whomever Melchizedek is, this was Abraham. We'll have to talk to you for hours about that. This was Abraham that was kind of in a foreign land. He's the father of the faith, but he meets Melchizedek, who's a priest of the same faith.
Mhm.
So we think that it's unheard of and crazy for someone to know the same God but not be a part of this group. But we have 2 different instances with 2 founding fathers of the faith that don't bat an eye at it. They just go on like, "Oh yeah, you must know the same God that I do. What do you call him?"
So what always gets me is and I don't know what they're called. There's probably a proper name for it, but every time throughout Scripture, it doesn't matter if it's Genesis 1 or what's his name going to Nod,
Cain.
Cain. You have these excerpts or whatever the word is, where you have this very Jewish lineage of how we got to where we are, where the Jews got to
Mhm.
where they are, why they're the chosen people, who Christ is, all these things, and and then you have these little spur offs of, oh, there's a land of Nod, there's other people. Oh, where did Melchizedek come from? Oh, where did Job come from? It tells where, but I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, oh, there's something else outside of this story.
Yeah.
It's like when you read Beauty and the Beast, okay, that's a horse on this farm, but there's other farms,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it may say, well, you know, Julie or whoever has a horse over here, but, you know, you're focused on, you know, this black horse in this story. And so you get monofocused on that, and then there's some things that kind of pull you off.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing in Scripture is we're monofocused on how God got to be God, how God is Christ, how Christ, how God made a law, and then how Christ come and fulfilled that law, and then, you know, and how we got to where we are now, and we're monofocused on this, and there's these little excerpts that just draw your attention, and you're like, what in the world? Whoa, my mind's
Yeah.
blown. But we do it because it's more than a book, and it's more than just history. It's a movement,
Yeah.
which I talk about, which Christ is.
Yeah.
It's not, how do you say, it's not Mary and
Mary and Joseph Christ.
didn't have a baby named Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Christ is this movement, and so
I'm glad that got you tickled.
It does.
That's
It
a
tickles
crowning
me every
achievement
time.
for me.
But you know, that just amazes me that we have people that get so, and being wrapped up in the Bible is not a bad thing.
Oh no.
But you get wrapped up in this Jewish story so much that you believe anything outside of that is not truth.
Yeah. So two things. First off, you said Beauty and the Beast. You meant Black Beauty. That's
Black
just to
Beauty.
clarify for everybody else.
Did I say Beauty and the Beast?
Yeah.
Oh my.
Because I was like, horse.
Black Beauty.
So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, because Sam was wanting, you know, where can I look in the Bible to see what the church standard is? Because he asked that question directly.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to remember that every book wasn't written to be leather bound and compiled together, and Moses didn't write the first 5 books and say, this is going to be the first 5 books of the Bible. No, he wrote that so his people knew where they came from.
Yes.
So the things he wrote, he left out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He left out where Nod came from. He left out all that. Why? Because it was it wasn't so that, you know, 21st century people would be mad. It was because it was common knowledge at the time, and he didn't need to fill that in.
Yeah.
And so when we read Acts and we read the letters that Paul wrote, there's some mystery to it, and we're like, well, how did they know when to meet? How did they know this? They talked to each other. They were there. They already knew it. We lack because we're not there. They don't have to explain where every individual person comes from because they've known them. They're there. They've experienced that. And so, again, part of my push in the furthering education in the world is you've got to study some world history to understand why these things are so commonplace. And there's a lot of things that Christians see as like these crazy mysteries, or they don't quite understand, that if you go and you look back and you see how did these people at this time think, believe, and read, makes a lot of sense. Woman is a perfect example. If you studied just the King James Bible and you never went any deeper, never read study notes, never talked to anybody, you would see Jesus really being a jerk to his mom. But one little translation and one little study, nowadays Google search, back then just read something, you find out that he's not saying woman, he's saying ma'am. But it's just that translation thing there. And it changes the entire meaning.
For us in America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you read about this question today popped up. What does the Bible say about hell? And so then you read and you begin to study. And you see a whole lot of stuff that's very diverse.
Yes.
You have a parable. It is a parable. It's not a history of Lazarus and the rich man. And you see that there's 2 different places that people can go when they die. One of them's hot, one of them's just there, and they're separated by a chasm, but the chasm's close enough they can talk. Okay? You hear about in Jude that fallen angels, known as dreamers, are chained in a black pit. until the day of judgment. But you also hear that there are still some angels that are flying around. You reread Revelation that Abaddon is released from a bottomless pit for a time, and that Satan and his minions will be bound there for a time.
Yes.
So that's a different location than Jude, or different group than Jude. How does that work? We read about a place with weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's all you really hear about that. Well, then you also hear about a lake of fire, but it's separate from that. But then you hear about all these things, and you hear about these names. You hear Tartarus, you hear Hades, you hear lowercase hell, you hear Sheol.
Yes.
And it takes a little bit deeper of a look into what that is. Popular church belief is and this is, I don't know where they get this, that hell is the dominion of these demons
Oh, yeah.
that are running around torturing lost souls. None of that's in the Bible. Because what would that imply? That would imply that the demons and Satan are doing God's work by punishing evil people. That's not how that
And
works.
they're able to withstand the punishment from God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it doesn't affect them.
Right.
Yeah.
And that you read that heaven is a gated community full of luxury, like you're staying at a 6-star resort even. And that's not biblical either. So you have to do some history, you have to do some exploration, and you have to say, when Jude wrote this, what was the belief? Where did Jude get this from?
Right.
Where did Jude pick up on that? Because that changes everything about it. And here's the bottom line, because I've done some, I hyperfixate. So I've done some deep dives. We don't know anything about any of it. We have no idea.
That's why people are terrified to die.
Because you can't pinpoint it. Because it doesn't make sense. But that's okay, because we're not supposed to know about that yet. That's a mystery. And here's what we know about heaven. Nothing. Because all the descriptions are New Jerusalem, which is a separate thing. Because New Jerusalem's going to come from the new heaven to the new earth. So where do we go from there? We gotta actually learn. We gotta actually take a step out of there. We have to be okay, and this is where people falter. This is why I don't have this. We have to be okay with questioning.
Absolutely.
I'll set this standard out there. I'll be so bold. You have to question everything you know, including what you think you know about the Bible, because you have to question what? You have to question who told you, where did they hear it from? Because a lot of what we know came from other sources that aren't the Bible. So you have to question your knowledge of it. Did I learn this on my own? Was this given from God? Was this given from man? You have to question why it is you're doing what you're doing. Because let me tell you the real fun part about this. A lot of our popular belief that I just mentioned of heaven and hell come from 2 books that aren't the Bible. Dante's Inferno and Paradise Lost.
Yes.
Those 2 have very different descriptions of heaven, hell, Satan, and the minions. But an amalgamation of that has become the popular belief of heaven and hell and how all the spirit realm work.
Yes.
None of it's biblical. John Milton and Dante Alighieri wrote biblical fan fiction, and the Christian world said, this is a lot more fun to read than this mysterious stuff right here. This is what we're going with.
So jumping on to what Joe's saying there, I'm glad you're a good student, Joseph. because
Yes.
That is exactly. So a lot of times I just ask people, what is your definition of heaven and what is your definition of hell? And to shorten all of what Austin's talking about, it's really 2 short answers. Hell is absolute. You have no hope. You have no you have no access to God. It's hard to say that you have no presence to God because God is omnipresent. But He removes your access to Him, closes that door to Him, which means you have no hope. And people that think they have no hope is not a clue to what really no hope is.
Mhm.
No access to God whatsoever. And people that don't even believe in God don't understand no access to God.
Mhm.
Because even though they don't believe in Him, they say they don't believe in Him, or they're trying not to believe in Him, they're forcing themselves not to believe in Him, or however they got there, they have no idea what it's like to have absolutely no access to God,
Yeah.
no hope. So that is hell.
Yeah.
The opposite of that is to be in the presence of an uncloaked, holy God that is you're engulfed in love, you're engulfed in His presence, you're engulfed in power and majesty, and that is heaven. And so I've heard this all my life, but I've come to the idea that what they were saying when I was a kid was true. Is sometimes we would have a service and just no one was speaking in tongues, no one doing nothing, and the whole room would feel like a big fluffy cloud, and you were just engulfed and everybody just crying, and you were engulfed in this just power and majesty and love. And people would say, we just had heaven on earth.
Mhm.
And later on in years, I thought they were crazy. Looking back at it now, that's exactly what we had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's heaven.
We could use some of that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I think that's really a good finishing note there too, because I feel like we start to talk in circles after a while. I also feel like a lot of what our podcasts are just repetitions of the same thing just over and over again. But
Sometimes.
it's always with new information. It's always with more. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No.
Did you got anything?
I'm good.
Folks, we appreciate you joining us today. As we end the year out, we really just from the bottom of our hearts thank you for being with us through this. We pray that you continue to stick with us as we keep going. We are always welcome to conversation, not argument, but conversation. We want to hear from you. We love you. We thank you. We will probably have a fairly short something for you next Sunday, because I can't within my heart say we're not going to have church because it's Christmas, because that doesn't seem like that works. Because of the birth of Jesus, we're not going to celebrate Jesus. So at the very least, I promise you I'll put something out here, but I can almost guarantee we'll come and talk to you for a little bit. As we start the new year, we have a great lineup of guests coming on here. We are going to have our very first professing Catholic on here. We'll have a great discussion with him. He's a fantastic guy. Really excited to introduce you guys to him. Anna will be rescheduling to come with us the next week on there, so you've still got time to get your questions in. She's feeling a lot better. And our guest that was supposed to be on today, she's had to reschedule, so she'll be sometime either late January or mid-February for that as well. It's a great looking year. It's been a fantastic year for us. We love you. God bless you. Enjoy.